This past week, all saw the news. We're hearing about when it took place, the tornado that touched down, passed through Nash County, Rocky Mount, that area. And as the news reports came out, and they showed a picture of the Pfizer manufacturing plant and how much damage it had done to it. And I said to myself, well, that was horrible, but I could picture in my mind where it was at, because across the street from Pfizer is a golf course that I've discovered and I love going to. And I said, well, if it came right through there, then it hit that golf course. And so the next day I began to look a little bit on the internet, and sure enough, there were some things, some television stations had interviewed some people. As it turns out, as the tornado came through the golf course, it caught like 10 golfers out on the course. They left their phones in their cars, and so they didn't know there was a tornado warning. One was on the ground and heading that way. So they were called out there, and they were interviewing one of the gentlemen that had gone through this, and he was telling about, he started talking, he got emotional. And as you know how television reporters, they can just kill you with the obvious question. You seem to be upset. What has you emotional? And, he was telling about that they're trying to drive to get to shelter, and trees were falling in front of him in the golf cart, and he tried to back up, and they were falling behind him. And, one turned the cart over, and the guy just got down to one of the sand bunkers, for the tornado to go over. And But when she asked him, why are you emotional? He had the best response. He said, I was scared to death. The obvious. A tornado went right over you, and he says, I was scared to death. At that moment, probably didn't think about golf scores, didn't think about how the day had gone or anything. It was just focused on that moment. Am I going to die? What's going to happen to me? When you look at the definition of focus, that's the center of interest, and concentration is the direction or attention to a single object. Simon Peter, in writing, he understood how important it was to focus, to single something out. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4 says this. He says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. What if we focused on that? What if we focused on that idea? The Bible constantly instructs us, repeatedly says to keep our minds, to set our minds on things that are above. He says to not lay up treasures here on earth, but lay up treasures in heaven. To fix our eyes on the things that are unseen, not the things that are seen. And it goes on and on. The first century Christians, the very first Christians that came along, heaven was constantly on their mind because they were constantly under persecution, the threat of death. So heaven was real to them. They even prayed, come, Lord, quickly come. The slaves in our country, the early slaves in our country of America, the ones who were Christians sang spirituals. Heaven was always on their mind. Some of the words to some of the songs were like, this world is not my home, I'm just passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. They knew that there was something more. They were looking for something more. That hope of heaven empowered them to endure and to keep going through difficult times. So here we are in our second week of our series, What If? Well, we're just asking the question, what if? And today I just want us to focus on the idea of what if. What if every day? Not just when a tornado is coming, not just when we get a bad diagnosis. But what if every day we thought about heaven? What if we were always conscious to the front of our mind that we are heaven bound? How would that change how we live? But let's be real honest about it. For most of us, it's hard to focus on heaven because we have it so good here. we've got it pretty good. Now, I know we go through periods of life when it isn't good, but we've got it pretty good. Some would describe it as heaven on earth. And there's some that would go so far as to say, I would trade heaven if I could just keep things the way they are here on earth. It's kind of like the preacher who walked into a Sunday school class, the 6th grade boys, and he just said, who wants to go to heaven in here? And nobody raised their hands. And he said, none of you want to go to heaven when you die? And the little boy said, oh, he said, I thought you meant today. You know, and that's kind of how we are. We want to go someday, just not today. Hey, I just want to give us a few reasons, things to look from the scriptures and see why heaven, how we would be served so much better to have heaven on our minds. First thing is this: it reduces our attraction for this world. 1 John 2:17 says, the world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. If your primary focus is in heaven, you recognize that this world is just temporary. And all the things with it, it's temporary. You don't become so enamored with the world that you hold on too tight. You don't put your hopes and dreams, all your eggs in the basket of just what's this world's about, because you know it's destined for destruction. Look at this photo. Say what that is. Yeah, the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. Do you know when this picture was made? I don't know when it was made, but I know when it wasn't made, after September 11th, 2001, because they were destroyed on that day. They came tumbling down. And something that stood before mankind and you just think could never collapse, never destroy, were lost in hours. You see, if your hope is primarily in heaven, when things do collapse, we're not terrified. We're not jealous and envious when others have more of the worldly treasures than we do. We're not easily tempted to go after those temporary things. We keep our eyes on heaven. We don't get so caught up in our own success. You can enjoy the world, but you won't be overwhelmed by it. We can enjoy the world, but not be overwhelmed by it. That's what heaven does for us. It's another thing that heaven does for us. It gives us a permanent hope for the future, regardless of what happens in this life. 1 Peter 1:6 goes right on. We read a little bit before, but he keeps going. He says, in this you greatly rejoice in what Jesus has done for us. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Sitting in this room here today, there are people from every spectrum of life. There's some on the meter, we'll peg it on one side that we are so blessed financially. And there's somebody sitting here, or some who are sitting here, that they don't know how they're going to pay next week, bills for next week. And then there's many in the middle. There's some here who I feel like describe me, that I have been blessed so much physically that I have not had to suffer and put up with physical ailments like some of you have had to deal with. And so I kind of peg the meter on this side, but there's others who peg it on the other side. That it almost seems like there's been one thing after the other. There's some who sit here, and as far as the family, you came from a family who taught you and raised you up and gave you advantages and put you on the right way, and you peg the meter on that. But then there are some of the others that your family has been something that drug you down, or they set you on such a path to begin with that you've had to work 10 times as hard to overcome those disadvantages. Physical abilities, disabilities. Some things in this life, many things in this life that are never going to be made equal, that are never going to be rectified. It's just the way life is going to be. And if that is your primary focus, it's just this life and how fair it is and how somehow so much more than others. If that's your only focus in this life, I can understand how you become increasingly bitter, increasingly discouraged, and especially as life goes on. But if heaven is your focus, you don't become that way. 2 Corinthians 4:17 and 18 says, For our light, Paul said, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. On the scales of life, you may be the one who has carried so many injustices and things that just didn't go, that it's weighed so totally down on one side. But Paul says, compared to the riches of heaven, it doesn't even compare. And even if you're the one that's been in life that's had all the advantages and seems to have all the breaks and everything that's went your way and everything just seems to work out, and it seems like it's just tipped the scales that way. Compared to heaven, they're nothing. Heaven reminds us that we're looking forward to a time when all things will be made good. Things will be made equal. There's a second chance. Listen to this. If a person has a why to live, they can endure any how to live. If you have a reason, if you have the why to live through the good and the bad, then no matter how bad it is, you can live through it. Moses, when he was a young man, Hebrews 11 tells us that he chose to be mistreated with his people rather than enjoy the short-term riches of sin. He had the big picture. He saw what the scales really looked like. And look at all the wonderful things that Moses was able to accomplish being a servant of God. And this same can be said for us. It's a third thing here. Third thing, advantage of being heaven bound is that heaven satisfies our longings for something greater. How many of you, just raise a hand, how many of you sometime in your life had a little fish, a goldfish, in a goldfish bowl? How have you had? Man, that's a lot of people. There's been a lot of goldfish around, hadn't it? A little fish bowl. How many of you had any any of you have turtles in a bowl? Did anybody have yeah, I had some turtles too. Hermit crab. Did any of you have a hermit? A few even had that. You know, I don't know. There's been a lot of dead fish and turtles, I'll tell you that. You know, that's the ultimate end for every one of them. I don't know what a fish thinks. I don't know what a fish can feel. I don't know what a turtle thinks. I don't know if when they crawl across the rock or they swim through the water and they continually bump against the glass. I don't know if they're thinking, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be something more than living in this bowl every day. I don't know. But I know us humans do. We instinctively, we know in our hearts and our minds that there's something more than just the fish bowl that we live in. It's in our hearts. It's in our minds. Solomon said God has set eternity in our hearts. David said, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you. Solomon again said, I have taken and indulged in every pleasure of this earth, and I am empty. Nothing fulfills me. Paul said in Romans, it's a unique thing to think about. Paul said in Romans 8, he said, all of creation, the world is groaning, longing for that day when things will be made right. A groaning and a longing. But he goes on and says this. This is a part I really hadn't paid a whole lot of attention to. Romans 8:23 says, not only so, talking about all of creation, he says, not only so, but we ourselves. who have the first fruits of the Spirit. He's saying the Christians, ones who have got the promise, those who have been given the Holy Spirit. He says, even us, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. Even as a Christian, we long. We know there's something more. We know there's more than just this. How many of you have got up on a Sunday morning, and maybe you felt it coming on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning you just don't want to come? You're down or something's, it just doesn't call you to come to church, but you came anyway. And you sat here and you were just running on fumes. You're on low battery power. And then, maybe it was one of the songs that Eric picked out a week before that just pricked your heart. Maybe it was the person you saw that's going through so much more than you, and you just were encouraged by seeing them here. Maybe it was somebody sang that day that just sang a song that just got right to your heart. Maybe it was the speaker who had picked out 6 months ago what he was going to speak on today, and the Holy Spirit had worked 6 months ago to have what you needed to hear that day. And you taste it right then. You taste what heaven-bound thinking does for you. That you get a taste of what that fulfillment and that purpose, and always going to be inspired and always encouraged, because you got a taste of it here. And there's that longing for it to always be that way. If heaven is out of your sight now, if you don't feel like you're living heaven-bound, think of these things to help you. Think of what's going to happen there. Let me run quickly through some of these. Revelation 21, start with verse 2, says, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. You want to know what's going to be there? One of the things is going to be beauty. It is going to be breathtaking. It's going to be just unbelievable. Niagara Falls, got Grand Canyon, the snow-capped mountains, the tropical clear waters, the gold and silver, all of the creation of man, the beautiful things that could ever be done, will not hold a candle to what heaven, the beauty of heaven, will be. I don't know if God just knew that we couldn't handle anymore, our minds couldn't handle what heaven would be like, and He created this world and gave us just a taste of beauty. All the different kinds of flowers and all the different kinds of geography and all the different things and all the things we can experience and sense that gives us a glimpse of what the beauty will be. Verse 3 says, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and He will live with them. They will be His people, and God Himself will be with them and be their God. God's going to be there. The one who created everything, He's going to be there. He says that He's going to live among His people. Have you ever noticed when someone's going to be somewhere that means something to us, we want to be there too? Just this week, I got a thing in the mail that Bob Russell is going to be up in Virginia Beach, Portsmouth area, and doing a 2-day conference. And I signed up immediately because I want to be where Bob Russell is. He means that much to me. I've probably heard everything that he's going to say that day, but I want to be there. The Eagles are going to be in Raleigh at PNC Arena November 9th. If you're just thinking of something you want to get for Greg, I want to be there. But you know how it is. We want to be where certain people are. And God's going to be there. He's going to be there and He's going to live among us. And I can't help but think that He is the Creator and knows everything, and everything is just at His fingertips and at His spoken word, that we're going to grow in knowledge and understanding, and that's going to come from what Him revealing to us. And even if we've got a question you've carried your whole life, and if it still seems important to us when we're there, it might be something that you can just ask Him, and He'll explain it. But He's going to be there. Look at verse 4. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. There will be comfort and healing there. I could have taken a large whiteboard and set it up here on an easel, and I just said, okay, let's start listing the bad things, the afflictions, the things that we've suffered with in this life. And you just start calling them out, and I'd write them down. I'm sure somebody write down cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, drug addiction, alcohol, depression. And we go through all of these diseases and things that have afflicted people for all time being. Every temptation that has tormented us. And we can write them up there. Have you ever been sitting and eating a meal, enjoying a great meal, and one fly comes around? One fly. One fly. And how it just torments you. And then finally somebody swats it, whacks it, and we flick it off in the floor, and it's a relief. It's like you go, I'm never going to be bothered by, I may be bothered by a fly again, but I'm not going to be bothered by that fly. Can you even begin to imagine the feeling when we stand in heaven and the whiteboard of all of the afflictions that have tormented mankind are swatted, and they are no more? No Christian ever persecuted again, never made fun of, never questioned, never canceled, never ostracized again. Just imagine what that is going to feel like. He goes on. Revelation 7:9 adds another one. It says, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the throne. Something else is going to be in heaven are all the Christians, all the saints. And in that group, there's going to be people that you loved, that you still love, that have gone on from this life. Moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and Sunday school teachers and a preacher that meant so much to you growing up, and husbands and wives and children that loved the Lord. And they're going to be there. They're going to be there and be a part of this. And if you don't like crowds, that's okay too, because God's going to take care of that. If the crowd that big scares you a little bit, it's okay. God's got that covered too. They're going to be there. One 92-year-old lady quipped, said, I hope I die pretty soon, or all my friends are going to think I didn't make it. One said that I've got more friends in heaven than I do here on earth. It kind of moves that way. And I guarantee you this too. As I'm talking right now, you're thinking of somebody. You're thinking of somebody you can't wait to see. And I am too. They're going to be there. All the Christians are going to be there. But I saved the very best for last. Revelation 5, verses 11 through 13 says, "Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice they sang, 'Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise.' Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them singing, 'To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever.'" You know, sometimes we get to enjoy something and we'll say, I've heard people even say, "Well, glad everybody's here, and the one who made it possible is not here today." When we're in heaven, the one who made it all possible is there. He'll be right there. He'll be on the throne. He will be in the place that he belongs, where he deserves to be, and that is on the throne. And he will be vindicated from all the people who criticized and doubted and persecuted and killed him. And you know what? For every Christian that has ever been made fun of and ridiculed, killed, because they put Jesus on the throne of their life, they will be vindicated as well, because all of creation will look and see Jesus is who he said he was. Jesus will be there. You see, so many times we say seeing is believing. But for you and I as a Christian, believing is seeing. Because by believing, we will see him. Let me wrap it up with this one last story. Minister, preacher, author Tim Keller was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in the latter parts of 2020. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he tweeted out and put on social media, and he says, "If you want to pray for me, here are some things you can pray for." He prayed, he said, "Of course, I pray for healing." He said, I ask you to pray for comfort and encouragement to my family." He said, "I pray, if you want to pray for me," he says, "pray that the treatments won't be so devastating that I will be able to continue to work, to write, and to speak." He said, "I also want you to pray this. Pray that Kathy," that's his wife, "Kathy and I do not waste this experience of what we're about to go through. That we will learn to let loose of this world for the next one. Don't waste this experience." Just days before Tim Keller died on May 19th of this year, he prayed aloud, and his son put this tweet out of what his dad had prayed. He said, "I'm thankful for all the people who've prayed for me over the years. I'm thankful for my family that loves me. I'm thankful for the time God has given me. But I'm ready to see Jesus. I can't wait to see Jesus. Send me home." Because it's going to be home. It's going to be home. Because all the things that are dear to us and so much more will be there. What if we lived heaven bound? That was always at the front of our minds, always at the front of our decisions, that we know where we're going and we act like we know where we're going.